If someone had told me a few years ago that the greatest betrayal of my life would come from someone I trusted like a brother, I would have laughed. Not because betrayal doesn't happen, but because I never believed he would be the one to do it. My name is Daniel Roberts, and before everything changed, my life was simple, maybe even ordinary. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't come from a powerful family. I didn't have investors waiting to back my ideas. What I had was a dream. And that dream came to me during one of the darkest seasons of my life. At the time, I was working long hours at a small warehouse on the edge of the city. The job was exhausting. 12-hour shifts. Heavy boxes. Constant noise from machines humming day and night. The pay barely covered my rent. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, dragging myself out of bed with tired eyes and a heavy heart. I would sit on the edge of my bed for a moment, staring at the cracked wall across from me, wondering if this was all life had planned for me. But deep inside, there was always a voice whispering something different. A quiet voice that said, "You were made for more than this." One evening after work, I came home later than usual. My shoulders ached from lifting crates all day, and my mind felt just as heavy. The apartment I lived in was small. Barely enough space for a bed, a worn-out couch, and a tiny kitchen table that wobbled whenever I leaned on it. But that night, something inside me felt different. Instead of collapsing into bed like I normally did, I sat at that little table and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank screen for a long time. Because for months, maybe even years, I had been thinking about an idea. An idea that kept returning to me no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. At first I dismissed it as a foolish dream. After all, people like me didn't start businesses. We didn't launch companies. We worked jobs. We paid bills. We survived. But the idea refused to leave my mind. It kept growing, evolving, becoming clearer every day. And that night, for the first time, I decided to write it down. I began typing slowly. At first, the words felt clumsy and uncertain. But within minutes, something amazing happened. The ideas started flowing faster than my fingers could keep up. Concepts. Features. Plans. Ways this business could help people solve real problems. I barely noticed the hours passing. Before I realized it, the clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. My coffee had gone cold, and the room was completely silent except for the soft tapping of my keyboard. But my heart was racing. Because for the first time, I could actually see it. The vision. The business. The possibility that my life could become something greater than endless warehouse shifts. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my tired eyes. Am I crazy? I whispered to myself. Starting a business wasn't just difficult, it was terrifying. It meant risk. Failure. Embarrassment. And the worst part? I had no idea where to begin. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I prayed. I closed my laptop and bowed my head right there at the kitchen table. God, if this idea is from you, show me what to do. The room felt still. Quiet. But something inside my heart felt lighter. Not because I suddenly had all the answers, but because I felt guided. That night I went to bed with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next few weeks were different from anything I had experienced before. Every free moment I had, I worked on the idea. Before work. After work. Weekends. Late nights. I studied business models, watched online tutorials, and filled notebooks with plans and strategies. Slowly, the dream began to take shape. The idea wasn't just possible. It was powerful. It had the potential to grow into something big, something that could change my life. But there was one problem. I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone I could trust. Someone who believed in me. Someone who would support the vision instead of laughing at it. And there was only one person who came to mind. My best friend. Marcus. Marcus and I had known each other for nearly 10 years. We met during college orientation when we both got lost trying to find the same classroom. What started as a simple conversation turned into a friendship that survived everything: late-night study sessions, failed relationships, job struggles, and countless life disappointments. Marcus was the kind of friend who always knew how to lift your spirits. He was confident where I was cautious, bold where I was careful. If I was the dreamer, Marcus was the motivator. At least, that's what I believed. One Saturday afternoon, I invited him over to my apartment. He arrived carrying 2 large takeout bags and his usual wide grin. "Man, you sounded serious on the phone," he said as he dropped onto the couch. "What's going on?" I sat across from him at the table, my laptop open in front of me. My hands felt slightly nervous, because sharing this idea felt like revealing a piece of my soul. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I think I've come up with something big." His eyebrows lifted. "Oh really?" he said with curiosity. "Now you've got my attention." I turned the laptop toward him and began explaining everything. The concept. The business model. How it could work. How it could grow. How it could help thousands of people. At first Marcus listened quietly. Then his expression changed. His eyes widened. And suddenly he leaned forward with excitement. "Daniel," he said slowly. "This is brilliant." My heart pounded. "You really think so?" He nodded quickly. "Think so? Man, this could be huge." Those words filled me with energy. For the first time, someone else believed in the dream. Marcus stood up and began pacing the room. "You know what," he said. "We could actually build this. With the right strategy, the right investors, this thing could explode." I felt a wave of excitement. Maybe this really was possible. Maybe this was the moment everything changed. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "Listen," he said. "You can trust me with this, right?" I didn't hesitate. "Of course I can." He smiled slowly. A strange smile. One I didn't fully understand at the time. "Good," he said quietly. Because at that exact moment, while I believed I had just shared my dream with the one person who would help me build it, Marcus had already begun imagining something very different. Something darker. Something that would soon turn my greatest dream into my greatest nightmare. And I had absolutely no idea. Because later that night, after he left my apartment, Marcus made a phone call. A phone call that would begin a chain of events that would completely change both of our lives. But what I didn't know then was that the man I trusted like a brother was already planning to take everything from me. And the first step of his plan was already in motion. If there was one person in the world I believed would never betray me, it was Marcus. You see, Marcus wasn't just a friend. He was family. We met nearly a decade earlier, during one of the most confusing days of my life. It was our first week at college, and I remember standing in the middle of a crowded hallway, holding a class schedule I barely understood. Students were rushing past me in every direction. I must have looked completely lost. That's when Marcus walked up beside me and said with a laugh, "Let me guess. You have no idea where you're supposed to be either." I looked at him and laughed. Not even a little. That moment started something neither of us expected. We found out we were both headed to the same classroom, both majoring in business, and both trying to figure out life one step at a time. From that day forward, we were almost inseparable. We studied together. We complained about professors together. We stayed up until 3 in the morning arguing about our future. Marcus always talked big. He had that kind of personality that filled a room. "Man," he would say, leaning back in his chair with confidence, "one day we're not going to work for anyone. We're going to build something huge. At the time, those conversations felt like harmless dreams. But Marcus believed them. Or at least, he sounded like he did. After college, life didn't turn out the way either of us expected. The job market was brutal. We sent out hundreds of resumes and heard back from almost no one. I eventually landed the warehouse job I told you about. Marcus bounced between different sales jobs, startup gigs, and side hustles that never seemed to last very long. But through all of that struggle, one thing never changed. Our friendship. When my car broke down one winter and I couldn't afford repairs, Marcus helped me push it into a parking lot and spent an entire weekend helping me fix it. When he lost his apartment after one of his startups collapsed, I let him crash on my couch for 3 months. We weren't just friends. We were brothers in survival. Or at least, that's what I believed. Marcus always had a way of encouraging people. When I doubted myself, he was the first one to say something positive. When life knocked me down, he was the one telling me to get back up. That's why sharing my business idea with him felt natural. Safe. After our conversation that Saturday afternoon, Marcus became extremely enthusiastic about the idea. In fact, more enthusiastic than I expected. Over the next few days he kept texting me. "Man, I can't stop thinking about your idea. This thing could seriously work. You know what? I think we should start planning the launch." At first, I felt energized. I had spent months working on the concept alone. Now suddenly someone else believed in it just as much as I did. The following weekend, Marcus invited me to meet him at a small coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, he already had his laptop open and several sheets of paper spread across the table. He looked excited. More excited than I had ever seen him before. "Daniel," he said when he saw me, "you're going to love what I've been thinking." I sat down across from him. "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned forward. "I've been analyzing your idea, and honestly, it's bigger than you realize." My curiosity grew. "What do you mean bigger?" He pointed to his laptop screen. "You're thinking about launching this as a small startup," he explained. "But what if we scale it from the beginning?" I blinked. "Scale it how?" Marcus started talking faster. "We could bring in investors. Build a team. Launch a full platform instead of a simple service." His energy was contagious. The more he spoke, the more the vision started expanding in my mind. For nearly 2 hours we talked about the business. And during that conversation, I did something that would later haunt me. I told Marcus everything. Every detail of my business plan. My research. My strategy. My pricing model. My marketing ideas. Even the potential partnerships I had been quietly researching for months. Marcus listened carefully. Occasionally he nodded. Sometimes he asked questions. But most of the time he simply absorbed the information. When I finally finished explaining everything, Marcus sat back in his chair and smiled. "Daniel," he said slowly, "you've been sitting on a gold mine." My heart pounded with excitement. "You really think so?" Marcus nodded firmly. "I know so." He leaned forward again, lowering his voice slightly. "But if we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way." "What do you mean?" Marcus smiled. "I mean we need to make it bigger." Bigger. That word echoed in my mind. "What are you thinking?" I asked. Marcus folded his hands on the table. "We start building connections now," he said. "Investors, developers, marketing experts. We position this thing to explode." The idea sounded incredible. But it also sounded expensive. "I don't know if I can afford something like that," I admitted. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that yet," he said. "Let me help with the strategy. I know people. I can make some calls." I felt grateful. More grateful than I can describe. Because it felt like someone was finally standing beside me in this journey. Marcus, I said sincerely, I don't know what I'd do without you. He smiled again. Relax, man. That's what friends are for. We finished our coffee and left the shop feeling optimistic. As we walked toward the parking lot, Marcus suddenly stopped. Oh wait, he said. I need to grab something from the car. Give me a minute. I nodded and waited near the entrance. Marcus walked a short distance away, pulling his phone out of his pocket. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But what I didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't checking messages. He was writing. Quickly. Taking notes. Detailed notes. Every part of the business plan I had just shared with him. Then he opened his contacts and scrolled through several names. And a moment later, Marcus made a phone call. He lowered his voice as he spoke. Hey, he said quietly. I think I've found something big. He paused, listening. Then he smiled. Yeah, he continued. A business idea. And trust me, this thing could make serious money. There was another pause. And then Marcus said something that would eventually change everything. Don't worry, he whispered. The guy who came up with it has no idea what's about to happen. Meanwhile, I was still standing by the coffee shop door, completely unaware that the friend I trusted like family had just taken the first step toward stealing the dream I had worked so hard to build. And the worst part? I still believed Marcus was helping me. But very soon, I was about to learn the truth. Looking back now, the signs were there. Clear. Obvious. Impossible to miss. But when you trust someone with your whole heart, your mind has a strange way of ignoring the things that should worry you. And that's exactly what happened to me. In the weeks after Marcus and I talked about the business idea at the coffee shop, life seemed to move faster than usual. At first, everything felt exciting. Marcus texted me almost every day. I'd been thinking about marketing strategies. We should look into partnerships. Man, this thing could really work. Each message made me believe we were building something together. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally moving towards something bigger than survival. But slowly, something started to change. At first, it was subtle. Small things that didn't seem important. Marcus stopped replying to my messages as quickly as he used to. When I asked him questions about the business, his answers became shorter. More vague. More distracted. One evening, I called him after work to talk about an update I had made to the business plan. He answered on the third ring. Hey man, he said quickly. His voice sounded rushed. You busy? I asked. Yeah, kind of, Marcus replied. What's up? I just wanted to tell you I refined the pricing model we talked about last week, I said. I think it might actually make the whole thing more profitable. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said something that caught me off guard. Oh, yeah. Cool. Cool. That was it. No excitement. No questions. Just, cool. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, Marcus replied quickly. Just dealing with some stuff right now. What kind of stuff? Another pause. Just work things, he said. Something about his tone felt different. But I brushed the thought away. Everyone goes through stressful weeks. I told myself not to overthink it. Still, the strange behavior continued. Marcus started canceling our meetings. The coffee shop brainstorming sessions we had planned suddenly stopped happening. Whenever I suggested we get together to work on the business, he had an excuse. Busy this weekend. Got something going on tonight. Let's talk later. Later. That word became his favorite response. But later never seemed to come. One Friday evening, I sent Marcus a long message about a potential feature I wanted to add to the platform. Hours passed. No reply. That wasn't like him. Marcus had always been the kind of person who responded immediately, especially when it came to ideas or opportunities. Finally, close to midnight, my phone buzzed. Marcus. Sorry bro, crazy day. We'll talk soon. That was it. No questions. No interest. Just a quick message. Again, I ignored the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Trust has a way of blinding you. A few days later, something happened that made the feeling even stronger. I was leaving the warehouse after a long shift when my phone rang. Marcus. Hey man, he said when I answered. His voice sounded different again. Lower. Quieter. What's up? I asked. I'm downtown right now, Marcus said. Meeting someone. Meeting someone? Yeah, just a business thing. My curiosity grew. What kind of business thing? There was a brief silence. Then Marcus cleared his throat. Nothing big, he said casually. Just networking. Networking? I frowned slightly. Networking for what? Marcus chuckled. You know, just making connections. But for the business? I asked. Another pause. Something like that. Something about his answer didn't sit right with me. Marcus had always been open with me. Transparent. Now suddenly he was being careful. Mysterious. You want me to come down there? I offered. Maybe I can meet whoever you're talking to. Marcus answered immediately. No. The word came out too quickly. Too firmly. Then he softened his tone. I mean, it's not that kind of meeting. Just something quick. Okay, I said slowly. Well, let me know how it goes. Yeah, Marcus replied. But he never did. That night I sat in my apartment working on the business plan again. I opened the documents on my laptop and began reviewing everything I had created. Every idea. Every strategy. Every detail. And as I looked through those files, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if Marcus is already talking to people about the idea? At first, the thought made me smile. That would actually be good. It meant he believed in the vision enough to share it with others. Still, something inside me felt unsettled. The next day, something even stranger happened. I was eating lunch in the small break room at the warehouse when one of my coworkers sat down across from me. His name was Kevin. We weren't close, but we chatted occasionally during breaks. Kevin scrolled through his phone while eating. Suddenly he looked up. Hey Daniel, he said. Yeah? Didn't you say you were working on some kind of startup idea? I nodded cautiously. Yeah, why? Kevin shrugged. I think I heard something about a business like that online yesterday. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Kevin turned his phone toward me. Someone on a business forum was talking about a new concept launching soon, he said. Sounded pretty interesting. I forced a small laugh. There are millions of startup ideas online. Yeah, Kevin said. But this one sounded really specific. My stomach tightened slightly. What kind of idea was it? Kevin thought for a moment. Well, something about a platform that connects people with. He stopped suddenly. Actually, he said slowly, it sounds kind of like the thing you described a few weeks ago. My heart began beating faster. That's weird, I said quietly. Kevin shrugged. Probably just coincidence. Probably. But the word didn't comfort me. Later that night, curiosity got the best of me. I opened my laptop. Then I typed a few keywords related to my business idea into the search bar. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Just articles, blogs, and random startup discussions. I almost closed the browser. But something told me to dig deeper. So I searched again. Different keywords this time. More specific ones. And then something appeared. A small article on a startup blog. The headline was simple, but the words made my blood run cold. New startup preparing to launch innovative platform that could disrupt the industry. My heart pounded as I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly. And when I began reading the description of the business concept, my hands started shaking. Because the idea being described wasn't just similar to mine. It was identical. Every detail, every feature, every concept I had spent months developing. But the most shocking part wasn't the idea itself. It was the line at the bottom of the article. The line that identified the person behind the project. The founder. The visionary. The one claiming ownership of the idea. And when I read that name, my entire world seemed to stop. Because the name on that page was someone I trusted. Someone I believed would never betray me. Someone I had called my best friend for nearly 10 years. Marcus. And in that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The words on the article blurred together as my heart pounded louder and louder in my chest. Marcus. The name at the bottom of the page was unmistakable. Founder, Marcus Bennett. I blinked several times, hoping and praying that I had misunderstood something. Maybe it was a different Marcus. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the idea only sounded similar to mine. But the more I read, the worse it became. Every paragraph described my business idea in exact detail. The platform concept. The service model. Even the unique feature I had spent weeks refining late at night in my tiny apartment. It was all there. Every piece of it. Except one thing. My name. I leaned back slowly in my chair, feeling as if the air had been knocked out of my lungs. No, that can't be right, I whispered to myself. I grabbed my phone and opened Marcus's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. But something stopped me. Instead of calling him immediately, I kept reading. The article wasn't long, but it contained enough information to make my stomach twist. According to the post, Marcus was preparing to launch a startup that promised to revolutionize the way people connect with services online. Investors were already showing interest. Developers were reportedly working on the platform. And the launch date was only a few months away. A few months. My heart sank deeper. That meant Marcus hadn't just taken the idea. He had already begun building it. I felt a wave of disbelief crash over me. How was that even possible? Just a few weeks ago, we were sitting in that coffee shop talking about the dream together. Planning. Brainstorming. Imagining the future. And now suddenly, Marcus was launching the company on his own? None of it made sense. Unless he had been planning this from the beginning. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled further down the page. Then I saw something that made my chest tighten. There was a photo. Marcus stood in the center of the image wearing a confident smile, shaking hands with two men in business suits. Behind them was a banner with the company's logo. A logo that looked eerily similar to the sketch I had once shown him during one of our brainstorming sessions. I felt sick. Because I remembered that night clearly. I had drawn the concept on a piece of paper while explaining the brand vision. Marcus had looked impressed. Man, he had said with excitement, this could really work. And now, here it was. Except it wasn't ours anymore. It was his. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Why hadn't he told me? Why hadn't he asked me to be involved? Why was my name nowhere in the article? I closed my laptop for a moment and rubbed my face with both hands. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Marcus was planning to surprise me. Maybe this article was just an early announcement, and he would include me later. Yes. That had to be it. Marcus wouldn't betray me like that. Not after everything we had been through. Not after 10 years of friendship. I grabbed my phone and called him. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. I frowned. That was strange. Marcus usually answered my calls immediately. I tried again. This time the phone rang even longer before disconnecting. A knot formed in my stomach. I sent him a text. Hey man, just saw something online about your startup. Call me when you can. I waited. Minutes passed. No response. I stood up and began pacing around my apartment. The silence from Marcus felt louder with every second. Finally, nearly an hour later, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. I opened it quickly. Yeah, I was going to tell you about that. Been busy. Let's talk later. That was it. No explanation. No excitement. No mention of me being involved. Just a short message. My chest tightened. I typed back quickly. Tell me about what? That article basically describes my entire business idea. The message showed delivered. But Marcus didn't reply. Another hour passed. Still nothing. Frustration began replacing the confusion inside me. I opened my laptop again and returned to the article. This time I noticed something I hadn't seen before. At the bottom of the page was a link. A link to a video interview. Curiosity pushed me to click it. The video loaded slowly. Then the screen showed Marcus sitting across from a podcast host. A microphone rested in front of him. He looked relaxed. Confident. Proud. The host smiled and leaned toward Marcus. So Marcus, the interviewer said, people are already calling your startup one of the most exciting ideas of the year. Where did the inspiration come from? My heart pounded as I listened. This was the moment Marcus would explain everything. He would say we built the idea together. He would mention my name. He had to. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled. Well, he said calmly, the idea came to me during a period when I was thinking deeply about how technology could solve everyday problems. My stomach dropped. He continued speaking. I spent months researching and developing the concept before finally deciding to launch the company. Months. The word echoed painfully in my mind. Months? That was impossible. I had only shared the idea with him a few weeks ago. The host nodded, clearly impressed. That's incredible, he said. So this whole vision came directly from you? Marcus smiled wider. Yes, he replied confidently. It's something I created from the ground up. Something inside my chest shattered in that moment. Because there it was. No misunderstanding. No confusion. No shared credit. Marcus wasn't just launching the business. He was publicly claiming the entire idea as his own. And the whole world was starting to believe him. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak swirling inside me. The man I had trusted like a brother. The man I had shared my dream with. Had just stolen everything. And he wasn't even trying to hide it. He was standing in front of cameras. Smiling. Telling the world that the dream I had built from nothing belonged to him. And as the interview ended, the host said something that made my blood run cold. Well, Marcus, he said enthusiastically, it's amazing to see such a brilliant idea come from one person's vision. Marcus nodded proudly. Thank you, he said. I've worked very hard to make this happen. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands were shaking. Because in that moment, the truth became impossible to ignore. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me. He had stolen my dream. And now he was building an empire on top of it. But what I didn't know yet was that the story was far from over. Because very soon, Marcus would take the betrayal even further. And the pain that followed would change my life forever. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus sitting in that interview chair, smiling, calmly telling the world that the idea I had built was his. My mind replayed every moment from the past few months. Every conversation. Every brainstorming session. Every time I had trusted him with another piece of the plan. And now it all felt like a cruel joke. By morning, the confusion inside me had turned into something else. Determination. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus again. This time he answered. "Hey," he said casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. My chest tightened. "Marcus, we need to talk." There was a brief pause. "About what?" he asked. The calmness in his voice made my blood boil. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. Another pause. Then Marcus sighed. "Daniel, I'm a little busy right now." Busy? That word felt like an insult. "You're launching a company based on my idea," I said slowly. "And you're telling people you created it." Marcus didn't respond immediately. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint sound of traffic on his end of the call. Then he chuckled softly. And that sound sent a chill down my spine. "Daniel," he said, "you're overreacting." Overreacting? My hands clenched around the phone. "Marcus, that business is my idea," I said firmly. "You know it is." There was another pause. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. It was colder. Sharper. "You're remembering things wrong," he said. The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "You shared some thoughts with me, sure," Marcus continued calmly. "But the actual concept? The real strategy?" That came from me. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "That's not true," I said quietly. Marcus sighed again, sounding almost annoyed. "Daniel, you had a rough sketch of an idea. I took it and turned it into something real." My heart pounded harder. "You took my work," I said. "Every detail in that article came from the business plan I showed you." Marcus laughed. Not loudly, but enough to make my stomach twist. "You're giving yourself way too much credit," he said. I felt my chest tighten with disbelief. "How can you say that?" I demanded. "You sat across from me at that coffee shop while I explained everything." "Yeah," Marcus said casually. "And I improved it." The arrogance in his voice made my hands tremble. "Marcus, we talked about building this together." Another pause. Then Marcus said something that cut deeper than anything else he had said. "Daniel, be honest with yourself." His voice lowered. "You never had the resources to make this happen." The words felt like knives. "But I do." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Marcus continued. "I found investors. I built a team. I actually moved the idea forward." He paused. "You should be thanking me." Thanking him. My chest burned with anger. "Thanking you?" I repeated. "Yeah," Marcus replied calmly. "Because if I hadn't stepped in, that idea would still be sitting on your laptop doing nothing." I felt something inside me break. "Marcus," I said slowly, "you stole from me." The silence on the phone stretched for several seconds. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice carried a warning. "Careful with that accusation." "Why?" I asked bitterly. "Because it's true?" "No," Marcus replied. Because no one is going to believe you. Those words landed like a hammer. I didn't want to believe him. But deep down, a small voice in my mind whispered that he might be right. Marcus had already positioned himself as the founder. The visionary. The entrepreneur bringing the idea to life. Meanwhile, I was just a warehouse worker with a laptop and a story. Marcus, I said quietly, 10 years of friendship, and this is how you treat me? Marcus didn't hesitate. This isn't personal, he said. It's business. Something inside my chest went cold. 10 years. Reduced to one sentence. Before I could respond, Marcus spoke again. And Daniel? Yeah. You might want to stop talking about this idea being yours. My heart sank. Why? Marcus's answer came quickly. Because it's starting to sound desperate. Then he hung up. I stood there in my apartment, staring at the phone in my hand. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't know what hurt more. The betrayal itself. Or how easily Marcus had erased me from the story. Over the next few days, things got even worse. I tried explaining this situation to a few of our mutual friends. At first, they listened politely. But their reactions slowly began to shift. Marcus said you guys were just brainstorming together. He told me the real idea came from him. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. The words made my stomach twist. Then one friend said something that hurt more than anything else. Daniel, are you sure you're not just upset because Marcus actually made the business happen? I felt like I had been punched in the chest. They didn't believe me. Not really. Marcus had already built the narrative. And the more successful he appeared, the easier it was for people to accept his version of the story. Within weeks, the situation became even more painful. Marcus's startup began appearing everywhere online. Tech blogs, podcasts, business magazines. Investors were praising the concept. Comment sections were filled with excitement. People were calling it the next big platform. Every time I saw those headlines, my chest tightened. Because I knew where that idea came from. But no one else did. And slowly, painfully, I began to realize something terrifying. Marcus might actually get away with it. Then one evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw a headline that made my stomach drop. Startup founded by Marcus Bennett secures major investment deal. I clicked the article with shaking hands. The numbers made my heart sink. Millions. Millions of dollars in funding. Marcus's company wasn't just surviving. It was exploding. The comments were filled with praise. Brilliant founder. Incredible vision. Future billionaire. I stared at the screen, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Because the man who had stolen my dream was now becoming wildly successful from it. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop him. Or at least, that's what I believed at the time. The moment I finished watching Marcus's interview, I knew one thing. I couldn't stay silent. For 10 years Marcus had been more than a friend to me. He had been someone I trusted with my struggles, my dreams, and even my fears. So hearing him calmly tell the world that my idea was his felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under my feet. But I needed to hear the truth from him directly. I needed to look him in the eyes. So the next day, I went to find him. Marcus had recently started working out of a small co-working office downtown. It was the kind of place filled with young entrepreneurs, whiteboards covered in ideas, and people walking around talking about startups and funding rounds. The kind of environment Marcus always loved. When I walked into the building, my heart was pounding. Part of me still hoped there was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe the article had exaggerated things. Maybe Marcus had planned to include me as a partner later. Maybe he just hadn't explained the situation properly. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The receptionist pointed me toward a glass conference room where Marcus was sitting with two men in suits. He looked confident. Relaxed. He was laughing as he spoke, gesturing toward a laptop screen like someone explaining a brilliant vision. My vision. I stood there for a moment watching him through the glass. The same guy who had once slept on my couch when he couldn't afford rent. The same guy who used to dream about building something big together. Now he was pitching investors with the idea I had trusted him with. I knocked on the glass. Marcus looked up. For a split second, surprise flashed across his face. Then he quickly forced a smile and excused himself from the meeting. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Daniel, he said quietly. What are you doing here? I didn't waste time. We need to talk. Marcus glanced back at the conference room. I'm kind of in the middle of something. My chest tightened. You're pitching my business idea in there. Marcus sighed. Daniel, we talked about this. No, I said firmly. You talked. I listened. He rubbed his forehead like I was giving him a headache. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I stared at him in disbelief. Bigger than it needs to be? Marcus, you took the idea I spent months building and launched a company with it. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's not what happened. His voice was calm. Too calm. What do you mean that's not what happened? I asked. Marcus crossed his arms. You had a concept, he said. I turned it into a real business. That concept was mine, I said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Was it? The words hit me like a slap. You're seriously going to pretend you came up with it yourself? I asked. Marcus leaned closer. Daniel, listen to yourself. His tone had shifted now. It was subtle, but I could hear the manipulation in it. You shared an idea during a conversation, he continued. But ideas are cheap. Cheap. The word burned. What matters is execution, Marcus said. And you never executed. My hands trembled with anger. Because I trusted you to build it with me. Marcus shrugged. Well, things changed. Things changed? I repeated. Marcus's eyes hardened slightly. You didn't have the connections, he said. You didn't have investors. You didn't have the skills to scale this. That's not true. Isn't it? He gestured toward the conference room behind him. Look inside that room, Daniel. Investors. Developers. Marketing experts. He paused. Do you honestly think you could have brought all that together? The question wasn't just an argument. It was an attack on my confidence. And Marcus knew it. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Look. I get why you're upset, he said. But you need to be realistic. My heart sank. Realistic about what? Marcus gave a small shrug. About the fact that this business is mine now. Mine. That word echoed painfully in my head. You stole it, I said quietly. Marcus's expression hardened. Careful, he said. Why? I asked bitterly. Because accusations like that can make you look unstable. Unstable. The manipulation was obvious now. He wasn't just denying the truth. He was trying to rewrite it. Trying to make me doubt myself. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened. One of the investors leaned out. Marcus, we're ready when you are. Marcus nodded. Be right there. Then he turned back to me. You should go home, he said calmly. My chest burned with humiliation. Marcus. This conversation is over, he interrupted. Then he walked back into the room and closed the door, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. The humiliation didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, I tried explaining the situation to our mutual friends. At first, they listened. But slowly, their reactions started changing. Marcus had already told them his version of the story. And his version sounded more believable. After all, he had the company. He had the investors. He had the proof of success. One friend even said something that shattered me. "Daniel, maybe you're just upset because Marcus moved faster than you." Another said, "Are you sure you're not remembering things differently?" Remembering things differently. It felt like the world was slowly turning against me. The worst part? Marcus never once acknowledged what he had done. Instead, he moved forward with the business like I never existed. And then one day, the headlines started appearing. Startup founded by Marcus Bennett raises millions in funding. The next big tech disruptor. Young entrepreneur changing the industry. Marcus's company wasn't just growing. It was exploding. And the man who stole my dream was becoming wildly successful because of it. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. After confronting Marcus, I expected something to happen. A confrontation. A scandal. Some kind of public exposure. But none of that happened. Instead, Marcus's company grew faster than anyone expected. Within months, his startup began appearing everywhere. Business blogs started writing about the innovative platform. Tech influencers praised the concept. Podcasts invited Marcus to talk about his journey as a young entrepreneur. Everywhere I looked, there he was. Smiling. Confident. Telling the same story over and over again. The story where he was the visionary. The creator. The genius behind the idea. And every time I heard that story, it felt like a knife twisting deeper in my chest. Because I knew the truth. But the truth didn't seem to matter anymore. One night after work, I turned on the television. A business news segment was airing. The host smiled at the camera. "Tonight we're speaking with Marcus Bennett, the founder of one of the fastest growing startups in the country." My stomach dropped. Marcus appeared on the screen. He looked different now. More polished. More confident. Like success had already changed him. The host asked him about the origin of the idea. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled. "It came to me during a period when I was thinking about how technology could solve everyday problems." The same lie. Again. And again. And again. I turned off the television. I couldn't watch anymore. But avoiding the story became impossible. Marcus's company kept growing. More funding. More press. More attention. Then came the articles about his wealth. Startup founders' net worth skyrockets. Photos began appearing online. Marcus standing beside luxury cars. Marcus speaking at business conferences. Marcus shaking hands with powerful investors. The man who once struggled to pay rent was now becoming rich. And he had built that success using the dream he stole from me. Meanwhile, my life was moving in the opposite direction. The warehouse job became harder to tolerate. Every day felt heavier. More exhausting. More meaningless. I would come home at night, sit on my couch, and stare at the laptop where the original business plan still existed. The files were still there. The ideas were still mine. But none of it mattered anymore. Someone else had already taken it. Slowly. Depression began creeping into my life. I stopped working on new ideas. Stopped meeting friends. Stopped believing that anything good could come from chasing dreams. Because the last time I had believed in something, it had been stolen. Even my family began questioning the situation. One evening, during dinner at my parents' house, my older brother brought up Marcus's company. I saw an article about your friend, he said casually. My chest tightened. Yeah, I replied quietly. That business sounds impressive, he continued. Then he looked at me with a puzzled expression. I thought you said you were working on something similar. The room suddenly felt smaller. I hesitated before answering. I was. My brother frowned slightly. So what happened? I swallowed. It's complicated. He shrugged. Well, if Marcus built it successfully, maybe the idea was really his. The words hit me harder than he probably intended. Maybe the idea was really his. Even my own family was starting to doubt me. I forced a small smile and changed the subject. But inside, something broke. Because in that moment, I realized something painful. Marcus hadn't just stolen my idea. He had stolen my credibility. And without proof, no one would ever believe the truth. Weeks passed. Then months. Marcus's company continued growing. Investors poured millions into the platform. The media called him a visionary entrepreneur. And I slowly faded into the background of my own story. Until one night. Something unexpected happened. I had just returned home from work when I opened my laptop to check my email. Most of the messages were the usual things. Advertisements. Bills. Spam. But one email caught my attention immediately. Because the subject line said something strange. I know the truth about Marcus Bennett. My heart began beating faster. I opened the email. The message was short. But the words inside it changed everything. Marcus didn't create that company. You did. And I have proof. The sender's name appeared at the bottom. Someone who worked inside Marcus's company. And in that moment, for the first time since the betrayal began, I realized something. The truth hadn't disappeared. It had only been hidden. And now, someone was ready to reveal it. To be continued. For a long moment, I just stared at the email. My eyes reread the same sentence over and over again. Marcus didn't create that company. You did. And I have proof. My heart began pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. For months I had felt completely alone. No one believed me. No one questioned Marcus. And now suddenly, someone inside his company was saying the exact thing I had been trying to tell everyone. I looked at the sender's name again. Olivia Chen. The email address ended with the official domain of Marcus's company. Which meant one thing. This person wasn't an outsider. She worked there. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Was this real? Was it some kind of prank? Or worse, some kind of trap? Marcus had already proven he was capable of manipulation. But something about the message felt genuine. I took a deep breath and typed a response. Who are you? I hit send. The waiting felt unbearable. Every few seconds I refreshed the inbox. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then suddenly, a new email appeared. My heart jumped. I opened it immediately. My name is Olivia. I work in the product development department. I've been with the company since the early stages. I leaned forward, reading every word carefully. Her message continued. I didn't know anything about you until recently. Marcus always claimed the idea was his. But over the past few months, things inside the company have started to unravel. Unravel. That word made my curiosity grow. I typed quickly. What do you mean? Her response came faster this time. Some employees started noticing inconsistencies in Marcus's story. Details that didn't add up. Development timelines that didn't make sense. My pulse quickened. For months, Marcus had convinced the world that the company was built from his vision. But apparently, the people closest to the project were starting to question that narrative. Olivia's next message explained more. During one internal meeting, Marcus described how the idea came to him. But a few senior developers noticed something strange. I leaned closer to the screen. "What?" I asked. Her reply came seconds later. The concept documents he showed the investors had earlier timestamps than he claimed. Months earlier. My breath caught. Months earlier. That meant something important. Marcus had told everyone he developed the idea long before launching the company. But if the files had earlier timestamps, then someone must have created them first. And that someone was me. I typed another question quickly. "How did you find out about me?" There was a longer pause before Olivia responded. When her message finally appeared, my stomach tightened. "Because your name appeared in one of the archived files." My name. I felt a chill run down my spine. Olivia continued. "At first we assumed you were a former collaborator. But when we asked Marcus about it, he became defensive." Defensive. That didn't surprise me. Marcus had always been quick to shut down uncomfortable conversations. Her message continued. Some of us started digging deeper. Quietly. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything. 4 months Marcus had looked unstoppable from the outside. But inside the company, cracks were forming. Olivia's next message confirmed it. There's tension in the office now. People are starting to question Marcus's leadership. That surprised me. Marcus had always been charismatic. Confident. The kind of person who could inspire people easily. But apparently the truth was harder to hide when you worked closely with someone every day. Olivia explained further. A few employees believed the company was built on someone else's work. My heart pounded faster. Then came the sentence that changed everything. We think that someone might be you. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the frustration I had been carrying for months suddenly felt lighter. Because finally, someone else could see the truth. I typed slowly. Why are you telling me this? There was a pause. Then Olivia responded. Because what Marcus did wasn't right. My chest tightened. Her message continued. And because I found something that proves it. My hands froze on the keyboard. What kind of proof? I asked. Olivia's response appeared seconds later. Documents. Internal emails. Original concept files. My heart began racing again. Evidence. Real evidence. Then she added one more sentence that made my pulse quicken even more. And some of those files show exactly where Marcus got the idea. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Because if what Olivia was saying was true, Marcus's entire empire was built on stolen work. And someone inside his company had the proof. But the next message from Olivia carried a warning. Before I send anything, you need to understand something. I waited. Her reply appeared slowly. If this information becomes public, it could destroy the company. Destroy the company. Which meant one thing. Marcus wasn't just risking his reputation anymore. He was risking everything. Then Olivia wrote the words that made my heart race faster than ever. I'm ready to show you the evidence. I stared at the message on my screen for several seconds before responding. Because part of me was afraid to hope. 4 months I had felt powerless. Marcus had the money. The company. The public support. But now, someone inside the company was saying they had proof that everything he built was based on my work. I typed carefully. Send it. A few minutes passed. Then my inbox refreshed. A new email arrived from Olivia. The subject line was simple. Evidence. My heart pounded as I clicked the message. Attached to the email were several files. Documents. Screenshots. Archived email threads. I downloaded everything and opened the first file. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. It was my original concept document. The exact file I had created months before Marcus launched the company. The same formatting. The same diagrams. The same wording. Even the title was identical. Except for one difference. At the bottom of the document was a metadata record. It clearly showed the original creation date. A date from months before Marcus ever announced the startup. And right next to the author field was my name. Daniel Roberts. My hands began shaking. This was undeniable proof. Marcus hadn't created the concept. I had. I quickly opened the next file. This one was even worse. It was an internal email sent from Marcus to the company's development team during the early stages of the startup. The email included attachments. Attachments that looked very familiar. My presentations. My strategy outlines. My diagrams. Marcus had forwarded them directly to his team as if they were his own work. But the timestamps on the attachments revealed the truth. The files had been created weeks before Marcus started the company. And they had originally come from my laptop. My chest tightened. Marcus hadn't just stolen the idea. He had stolen the actual files. The next document contains something even more shocking. It was a conversation between Marcus and one of the early investors. The investor had asked a simple question. Where did this concept originate? Marcus's response was cold. It's based on research I'd been developing for months. A lie. A complete lie. But now there was evidence proving it. My mind raced as I continued reviewing the files. More emails. More presentations. More documents showing the timeline. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Marcus had taken my work and built an entire company on top of it. Then Olivia sent another message. Do you see it now? I typed back quickly. Yes. Her next message came immediately. There's more. My stomach tightened. More? Then she sent another file. This one contained an internal discussion between several employees. They were questioning the origin of the business concept. One developer had written something that made my chest tighten. If these files originally belonged to Daniel Roberts, then Marcus didn't invent this platform. Another employee responded. If that's true, the company could be in serious trouble. Serious trouble. Because if investors discovered the truth, it wouldn't just be embarrassing. It could trigger lawsuits. Financial collapse. Public scandal. Everything Marcus had built could crumble overnight. But as I finished reading the evidence, a new concern entered my mind. Because exposing the truth wouldn't be simple. Marcus had powerful investors behind him now. Legal teams. Public relations experts. If I accused him publicly, the situation could turn into a massive legal battle. And I didn't have millions of dollars to fight that kind of war. I typed another message to Olivia. If this becomes public, what happens to you? Her reply came quickly. I could lose my job. That answer made me pause. Because suddenly I realized something. Olivia was risking her career to reveal the truth. Then she sent one final message. So the question now isn't whether Marcus stole your idea. My heart pounded as I read the next line. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Because in that moment, the truth was finally within reach. But revealing it could start a battle that would change everything. And once that battle began, there would be no turning back. To be continued. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I couldn't stop staring at the evidence. The files Olivia had sent sat open across my laptop screen like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. For months I had carried the weight of doubt, humiliation, and disbelief. People had questioned my memory. Some had even implied I was jealous of Marcus's success. But now the truth was right in front of me. Documented. Time-stamped. Undeniable. The first file was my original concept proposal. I remembered the night I wrote it so clearly. I had been sitting at my small kitchen table, typing until almost 3 a.m, driven by excitement and fear at the same time. The metadata in the file confirmed it. Author, Daniel Roberts. Creation date, 8 months before Marcus announced his company. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the document. Every detail was there. The same structure Marcus had shown investors. The same strategy he had presented in interviews. Even the exact phrasing I had used to describe the platform's core idea. He hadn't just borrowed inspiration. He had copied everything. I opened the next file. This one contained a chain of internal company emails. At the top of the thread was Marcus's message to his development team during the early days of the startup. The subject line read: Platform concept, initial development direction. My stomach dropped. Attached to the email were several documents. Documents I recognized instantly. My business presentation slides. My product diagrams. My strategy outline. Marcus had forwarded them directly to his team. But what shocked me the most was the way he described them. Here's the initial concept material I've been working on. The lie felt almost casual. Like it had never even occurred to him that someone might one day uncover the truth. My hands trembled as I opened another file. This one was a conversation between Marcus and one of his investors during the company's early funding phase. The investor had asked a simple question. What inspired this concept? Marcus's reply was calm and confident. It came from months of independent research and development. Independent research. Development. Every word was false. The next document revealed something even worse. It showed the moment Marcus had actually stolen the files. An archived email from months earlier. Marcus had forwarded my business plan directly from his personal email to a private folder connected to his startup project. The attachment still carried the original file name I had created. Daniel_Roberts_platform_concept_V1. He hadn't even changed the name. My heart pounded harder as the realization hit me. Marcus hadn't just stolen an idea. He had taken my actual work. My research. My designs. My vision. And built an empire on top of it. Then Olivia sent another message. Now you understand why some of us started asking questions. I typed slowly. Yes. Her reply came seconds later. There's enough evidence here to prove the concept didn't originate with Marcus. I stared at the screen. 4 months Marcus had looked untouchable. But these documents told a very different story. A story that could destroy everything he had built. Then Olivia added something that made my stomach tighten. But there's a problem. I frowned and typed back. What problem? Her reply appeared. Marcus has powerful investors now. Lawyers. Advisors. If you expose this publicly, it won't just be a scandal. I waited as she continued typing. Then the next message appeared. It could become a massive legal battle. My chest tightened. Legal battle. Those 2 words carried weight. Marcus had millions of dollars behind him now. Teams of lawyers. Corporate protection. Meanwhile, I was still working at the warehouse. Struggling to pay rent. If this situation turned into a courtroom fight, Marcus could bury me in legal costs before the truth ever reached the public. Olivia must have sensed my hesitation. Her next message appeared quietly. The evidence is real. But exposing it will start a war. I leaned back in my chair. For months I had dreamed about proving the truth. But now that the opportunity was in front of me, I realized something. Winning this fight wouldn't be simple. And once it started, there would be no turning back. The evidence should have made me feel victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. Because knowing the truth and fighting for the truth were two very different things. For days after Olivia sent the files, I carried my laptop everywhere, rereading the documents again and again. Each time I opened them, the same mixture of emotions returned. Anger. Validation. Fear. Marcus had stolen my work. That part was undeniable. But exposing him could trigger a legal battle I wasn't prepared for. Meanwhile, life outside this situation kept getting harder. The warehouse had started reducing hours. Management claimed it was due to declining demand, which meant my paycheck suddenly became smaller. Rent was already overdue. Bills kept piling up on my kitchen counter. One evening I opened my bank account and stared at the balance. It was barely enough to survive another month. The situation felt cruelly ironic. The man who had stolen my idea was becoming wealthy and famous. Meanwhile, the person who created the idea could barely afford groceries. That night I sat alone in my apartment. The room felt quiet. Too quiet. I opened my laptop again and looked at the evidence files. Proof of everything Marcus had done. Proof that the world had been lied to. But also proof that fighting back would require strength I wasn't sure I had. I closed the laptop slowly. Then I leaned forward and buried my face in my hands. For the first time since the betrayal began, I felt completely broken. Not just angry. Not just frustrated. Broken. Because everything I had believed about friendship, loyalty, and fairness had collapsed. Marcus had betrayed me. My friends had doubted me. Even my own family had questioned my story. And now the future felt uncertain. For a long time, I sat there in silence. Then something inside me shifted. Not a solution. Not a strategy. Just a simple thought. Pray. I hadn't prayed much during the months of chaos. I had been too busy trying to solve the situation on my own. Too focused on proving Marcus wrong. Too focused on the injustice. But that night, I realized something. I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. So I knelt beside my couch. The room was dimly lit by the small lamp on the corner table. And for the first time in months, I closed my eyes. God, I whispered. My voice trembled slightly. I don't know what to do anymore. The words came slowly at first. But once they started, they didn't stop. I trusted Marcus, I said quietly. I believed in him. And now everything feels ruined. Tears filled my eyes. He took my dream, and I don't know how to fight him. My chest tightened. Everyone believes him. My voice softened. But you know the truth. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty. Peaceful. So I continued. I've tried to solve this on my own, I said. But I can't. I don't have the power. I don't have the money. I don't have the influence. I took a deep breath. So I'm giving this situation to you. Those words carried weight. Because surrender isn't easy. But in that moment, something inside my heart began to change. The anger slowly faded. The bitterness loosened its grip. And in its place, something else appeared. Faith. God, I whispered, if this dream was truly from you, then you already know how this story ends. A tear rolled down my cheek. I trust you to reveal the truth." The room remained quiet. But inside my chest, the heaviness began to lift. Not because the problem was solved, but because I no longer felt alone in the fight. That night I stood up from the floor feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I didn't know how the truth would come out. I didn't know when justice would arrive. But deep down, I believed something powerful had just begun. And very soon, the world would learn the truth about Marcus Bennett. The morning light streamed through my small apartment window, but I barely noticed it. My inbox was overflowing, hundreds of messages, news alerts, and notifications. My phone buzzed incessantly. Every alert seemed louder than the last, and each carried the same shocking theme: something was happening at Marcus's company. I opened a major news website. Headlines screamed: "Startup founder under investigation after whistleblower leak." "Former partner claims ownership of original concept." "Investors question leadership at Bennett Tech." My heart raced. The truth I had prayed over, the evidence I had been too afraid to use, was now surfacing in the most explosive way possible. According to leaked internal emails, investors had begun asking uncomfortable questions. Management memos showed tension brewing among employees. Some had already started leaving the company quietly, refusing to be part of a business built on theft. And then came the whistleblower leak. Olivia, my secret ally, had managed to get additional proof into the hands of an investigative journalist. Screenshots, emails, presentation drafts, all undeniable. I watched Marcus's empire wobble. Investor confidence crumbled. Social media was alight with speculation. Original creator? Who is Daniel Roberts? They asked. Everyone was looking for the truth. But even as the company began to collapse, Marcus didn't go quietly. In a dramatic press conference, he pointed directly at me. "This is just another attempt by Daniel Roberts to take credit for work that isn't his," he claimed. His voice was confident. His smug smile cut through the chaos. And yet, the cracks in his story were already visible. Every journalist asking questions. Every employee stepping forward quietly. Every investor reviewing the original timestamps all pointed to one undeniable truth: I was the real creator. The lie was crumbling. But the world hadn't fully seen the justice yet. And then, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I asked cautiously. A calm, authoritative voice spoke. "Daniel, we've been reviewing the evidence you submitted. You're officially recognized as the original creator of the concept. Congratulations." My knees almost gave way. My chest filled with relief and disbelief. This was it. After months of betrayal, humiliation, and fear, the first signs of justice had arrived. But before I could celebrate fully, the voice added, "There's one more thing. Someone wants to speak with you directly. You'll want to hear this." I gripped the phone tighter. My heart pounded. My mind raced. Who could it be? And more importantly, what would they say? The call connected, and the voice on the other end was familiar, someone I hadn't expected. "Daniel, this is one of Marcus's investors. We've seen the evidence, and the timeline confirms everything. You are the true founder of this concept." I blinked, speechless. Months of praying, hoping, and trusting God had led to this moment. "Your friend betrayed you," the investor continued. "But the company and its investors now recognize the truth. Marcus's reputation is already crumbling, and it's only a matter of time before the media catches up." I felt a rush of emotions: relief, vindication, and gratitude. Former supporters who had doubted me began reaching out. Some apologized for siding with Marcus. Others offered to help rebuild my brand. Slowly, the universe seemed to be aligning in my favor. The evidence, my faith, and God's timing had worked together. The public investigation was swift, professional, and undeniable. Every email, every draft, every timestamp that I had feared would never matter, now became the proof that set the record straight. Meanwhile, Marcus's arrogance crumbled under scrutiny. Investors pulled funding, employees resigned, and his so-called empire began to disintegrate. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The darkness that had overshadowed my life began to lift. But just as I was letting relief sink in, my phone rang again, this time, a number from my own city. I hesitated, then answered. "Daniel Roberts?" A calm, yet excited voice responded. "We've been watching your story closely. We want to meet. We believe your vision deserves to be fully realized, with support, funding, and a team that will respect your leadership. Are you ready?" I stared at the phone. My chest swelled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. After everything, the betrayal, the loss, the pain, God had not only revealed the truth but was now opening doors to restoration that I had never imagined. And I knew, deep in my heart, that nothing, no betrayal, no stolen idea, no moment of despair, could ever take away what was truly mine. But who was on the other end of the line? And what would this next chapter of my life look like? The answer would change everything. The morning sun poured through my window, but this time, it didn't feel heavy or suffocating. Instead, it felt warm, bright, and full of promise. I had spent months in despair, betrayal, and doubt, but today, everything was different. Today, God's justice was complete. I walked into the small conference room where I was to meet the team that had called me. Investors, mentors, and even former employees from Marcus's company sat there, waiting. Their eyes were kind, expectant, and full of faith in me. Daniel Roberts, the lead investor, said warmly, "We believe in your vision. We want to help you rebuild it the right way, from the ground up, with integrity, transparency, and success that will last." I swallowed the lump in my throat. The tears I had shed over betrayal, humiliation, and broken trust threatened to fall again, but this time, they were tears of relief and joy. The journey had been long. The sleepless nights spent worrying about finances, the silent cries in my apartment, the endless prayers whispered into the darkness, all of it had led to this moment. For months, Marcus had thought he had won. He had stolen my idea, claimed it as his own, and reveled in a false success. But he had underestimated one thing: the power of truth, integrity, and God's timing. I was handed a folder containing every piece of evidence I had submitted during the investigation. Emails, drafts, timelines, and prototypes. For the first time, I could fully see the story of my dream, intact and unbroken, recognized and validated by the world. "This is yours," the investor said. "All of it. And this time, no one can take it from you." I nodded, barely able to speak. My hands shook as I touched the documents. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely free. That afternoon, the news broke. A major online publication featured my story. Original innovator reclaims business idea after betrayal. Daniel Roberts' vision officially recognized, former friend faces public backlash. Comments flooded in. Support, encouragement, and praise. People were inspired by my journey, moved by my faith, and amazed at the public vindication. Even my family reached out, full of apologies for doubting me. Old friends who had been swayed by Marcus's lies admitted they had been wrong. And the one person I never expected to hear from reached out quietly, a former colleague of Marcus's who had helped keep me grounded during the storm. "You've proven that integrity and perseverance will always prevail," she said. The next weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, planning, and rebuilding. Investors offered mentorship. I hired a team of passionate, loyal individuals who shared my vision. Every step forward felt like a reclamation. Not just of my business, but of my confidence, my hope, and my purpose. One evening, I sat alone in my new office, looking out at the city lights. I thought back to the night Marcus and my so-called friend had betrayed me. I remembered the anguish, the heartbreak, and the sleepless nights filled with tears. And yet, I realized something profound. I had not only reclaimed my dream, I had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I had ever been. God had turned my betrayal into triumph. The same hands that had been used against me had been the very hands guiding me to victory. The public vindication came next. A live interview aired where I shared my journey, the betrayal, the loss, the prayers, and the restoration. Millions watched. Messages of hope and inspiration poured in from people who had faced similar struggles. And finally, the ultimate moment of justice arrived. Marcus's company, built on deceit, collapsed publicly. He was forced to admit his wrongdoing, and legal consequences followed. All the wealth, prestige, and recognition he had thought he owned slipped through his fingers. The truth and God had won. As I held a cup of coffee that evening, overlooking the city skyline, I whispered a prayer. Thank you, Lord. For every betrayal, every tear, and every moment of doubt. You turned it into victory. You restored everything that was stolen. My dream, my hope, and my purpose are yours. For the first time in years, I smiled fully, without hesitation. Not because revenge had been served, but because justice, truth, and divine timing had prevailed. My idea, my vision, my business all were restored. But more than that, my faith had been proven unshakable, my perseverance unbreakable, and my future brighter than I could have ever imagined. And so, my story ends not in betrayal, but in triumph. Not in loss, but in restoration. Not in despair, but in faith fulfilled. The viewers watching this story, from the first moment of hope to the darkest despair and the final restoration, could now see one truth clearly. God's justice always arrives. And when it does, nothing can stop it.